I remember the night clearly, though it feels distant, like a half-forgotten dream. The forest around me was quiet, but not the kind of quiet you'd expect. It pressed against my ears, heavy and thick, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. Pale moonlight filtered through the branches, making the fog shimmer in gentle waves, turning the path beneath my feet into something uncertain, something alive. I carried a single candle in my hand. Its flame flickered with every gust of wind, casting shadows that seemed to stretch longer than they should, twisting in ways my mind refused to name. Somewhere deep in the distance I heard rustling, not the animals of the forest, but something slower, deliberate, watching. Every step felt like an invitation to something I couldn't quite see, something I didn't want to find. The air smelled faintly of smoke and damp earth, the kind that clings to your skin and doesn't wash off. My heartbeat sounded too loud, yet the silence around me was even louder, pressing into my chest. I thought I had prepared for everything, the cold, the dark, the isolation. But I wasn't ready for the eyes I felt on me before I could even see them. And then I heard it. A whisper, faint and curling like smoke around my candlelight. It called my name, soft, patient, and impossibly close. That's when I saw it. The forest was quiet. A pale fog hung low, curling around the trunks of tall pines. Night had pressed itself across the sky, thick and still. I carried a single candle. Its flame trembled in my hand, small and fragile. Each step on the wooden floorboards of the cabin echoed softly, swallowed almost instantly by the dark. The air smelled faintly of damp wood and smoke. Cold seeped through the cracks in the walls, settling against my skin like tiny needles. The candle's glow stretched across the room, thin and flickering, casting the shadows into strange shapes. I thought I saw them move. Just for a second, a corner of darkness stretched taller than it should have, leaning toward me. My breath was loud in my ears, slow, shallow, cautious. Each exhale seemed to shake the flame, and it sputtered as if warning me. The cabin groaned. A soft rustling behind the curtains. I froze. I told myself it was the wind, but the air was still. The smell of pine outside seemed distant, almost unreal. I stepped forward. The candlelight bounced over the walls, illuminating rough wood, old nails, a table strewn with dust. A chair tipped slowly without sound, though I hadn't touched it. Then it happened. A breath, faint, close, too deliberate to be mine. It brushed past my shoulder. I wanted to turn, wanted to look, but my body didn't obey. The candle flickered again, shivering violently. The shadows stretched, curling along the ceiling, along the floor, like fingers reaching. A hum rose in the air, low, almost inside my ears, vibrating against my chest. I whispered to myself. Just words no one would hear. Just the candle and me. I could feel it then. The presence. Heavy, quiet, pressing. It wasn't visible, not quite, but I knew it leaned closer, smelled of something cold, something forgotten. A soft footstep, or the memory of one, brushed the floor behind me. I flinched. The candle's flame wavered, dancing like it was afraid. The walls seemed to breathe. The shadows curved and recoiled with every flicker. I wanted to call out, but my throat felt heavy, tight. I moved slowly. Hand trembling, I reached toward the far corner. The candle's light touched nothing but darkness. Yet something shifted there. I held my breath. A chill grazed my neck. I imagined it. Something moving along the floor, just out of reach, unseen. The flame dipped. A pale, quick shadow flicked across the wall. It paused, silent. Watching, I felt my skin prickle. The candle's warmth was gone. The air had weight, like water pressing against me from all sides. A whisper of movement, closer now. Not footsteps, but pressure, brushing, circling, patient. I couldn't see it, couldn't name it, but I could feel it, waiting. The candle sputtered again. Tiny sparks leapt, threatening to die. I clenched it tight. Its fragile light was all that kept the dark from swallowing me. The floorboards groaned again. Something behind me shuffled, careful, deliberate. I didn't dare look. Every instinct screamed to run, but I couldn't. Time slowed. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Even the hum faded, leaving only the faint, trembling candle. I tried to make sense. A shadow, a breath, a brush of air. Was it real? or only my own mind unraveling in the dark. The candle's light danced once more, a sudden flicker, and then stillness. No movement, no breath, nothing. I stood alone. The cabin was quiet. The shadows waited. I could feel them, though. Every corner held eyes I could not see. Every space was heavy, patient. And then nothing moved at all. The candle wavered one last time. And in that silence, I realized I was not alone. The fog rolled over the forest path, thick, damp, curling around the trees like smoke. Each breath I drew tasted of wet earth and cold air. My steps pressed against the soft soil, alone, or so I thought. The echo of my shoes felt heavier than it should. Then, another step, soft, faint, mirrored mine. A rhythm just behind me, careful, patient. Shapes hovered in the pale light. Trees bent oddly, shadows stretching too long. Something shifted, then vanished before I could focus. The fog muffled everything. Even my own heartbeat sounded distant, hollow. I leaned forward, trying to pierce the gray haze. A whisper curled through the mist. Unintelligible words, soft and sharp at once. I tilted my head, straining. It didn't repeat. It didn't pause. It just lingered. I froze. The air pressed against my skin, cold and damp. The soil beneath my boots seemed to shift, unsettled. The footsteps continued. Not fast, not close, not far. They were always just there. Always following, always patient. I tried to tell myself it was my mind. The fog played tricks. Shadows bend, trees sway. But the rhythm, it was deliberate. A branch cracked. The sound stretched, echoing strangely in the thick air. I twitched. The steps hesitated for a heartbeat, then resumed. I moved faster. My own steps splashed through puddles, wet cold seeping through my shoes. The mirrored steps matched me, never faltering, never ending. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing, just fog, just gray. But I felt it. The presence. Waiting. Watching. Shapes flickered again. One shadow lingered longer than the rest. Then dissolved, swallowed by mist. The whisper returned. Closer this time. Almost under my ear. Still words I could not understand, but somehow they felt familiar. I stopped completely. The fog thickened, pressing around my chest, my throat. Breath shallow, trembling, a footstep. Nearer. One soft, deliberate step, then another. I could feel it circling, testing. The path twisted ahead. I could barely see my own hands in the pale gray. Something brushed my shoulder. Cold, light, fleeting. I spun, but nothing was there. The steps mirrored me still. A slow chase I could not escape. The mist closed in, swallowing the path behind me. I could not tell if I was being followed, or if the footsteps were mine alone, echoing wrong in the fog. I pressed on. Each step careful, each breath deliberate. The whispering stayed at the edges of my hearing. Fingers of cold clung to my arms, to my neck. I stopped again. The fog shifted, thin streaks of pale light teasing through the gray. And in that fragile glow, a shadow moved. Slow. Watching. Waiting. The footsteps fell silent. The whisper faded, leaving only the hum of the mist, the damp smell of earth, and the thrum of my heart. I stood frozen, alone, and yet not alone. The forest had kept its secret. The path ahead vanished into white, and the footsteps had not gone. The forest thinned. Sunlight barely touched the ground, filtered through broken branches. A faint smell of damp leaves lingered, heavy and sharp. I stumbled across something. A door, old, weathered, partially hidden by twisting vines as if the forest itself had tried to hide it. It hummed, a low, steady vibration through the wood. Soft, almost gentle, but wrong in a way that pressed against my chest. I crouched closer. The smell of decay rose from the cracks around the frame. The metal handle was cold, slick with moisture. I hesitated, fingers hovering. The humming grew louder when I reached out. I tried the handle. It gave under my touch, creaking with effort. A draft slipped through the opening, cold and sharp, brushing my skin like warning fingers. Something waited inside. I felt it before I could see it. Eyes unseen, heavy, watching, calculating. The air smelled of old wood and something older. Almost metallic. A shiver ran down my spine. I stepped back. Curiosity pressed against fear. I wanted to see. I wanted to know. I opened it further. The humming intensified. A whisper of movement behind the frame, something shifting just out of sight. I saw nothing. And yet, I knew I was not alone. The door had become a threshold to something else, something patient. The draft swirled around me. It carried the faint taste of dust and distant earth. A chill pressed into my lungs, slowing my breathing. The door creaked again, a soft, deliberate groan, as if it remembered every time it had been opened before. I felt eyes on me. Still unseen, I wanted to step back, but my feet were frozen. The air was heavy, humming, alive. A brush of movement. To my left? Right? I couldn't tell. The fog of breath and shadow wrapped around me, pressing against my senses. I tried to shut it. The handle resisted, sticky, reluctant. My hands trembled, the cold biting through my gloves. It closed with a final groan. The humming ceased. The forest seemed lighter, though the weight of what waited just behind that door lingered. I pressed my forehead against the wood. Heart pounding, throat tight. Regret seeped into me like water through cracked earth. I stepped away slowly. Every leaf, every broken twig beneath my feet sounded loud, echoing in the quiet. The door remained still, silent, hidden among the vines, but somehow aware. I smelled the fog around me, still damp, still heavy, carrying the forest with it. And though the door was closed, I could feel the eyes, watching, waiting. I didn't look back again. I couldn't. The memory of that cold draft, the invisible gaze, lingered in my skin. The path ahead was empty, the forest quiet. But the warning, the dread, stayed with me. The door had been there, and it would always be there, hidden in the forest, humming softly. Ready for anyone foolish enough to try again. The cabin smelled of dust and cold wood. Shadows clung to every corner, thick and heavy. A single candle trembled in my hand, its flame pale and fragile. The floorboards creaked beneath me, alone. Or so I thought. Then I heard it, a whisper. Faint, distant, rising from beneath the boards. It sounded like me. My own voice, twisted and soft, repeating syllables I didn't recognize. I froze. Dust swirled around the candlelight. It moved as if touched by invisible fingers. A chill brushed my neck. I stepped back. The floor slipped beneath my boots. A shiver ran through my spine. The whisper persisted. Closer now, patient, circling, echoing my own words. I bent slightly, listening. The cabin grew colder with every breath. Air pressed against my skin, damp and heavy. Even the shadows seemed to lean closer, waiting. I imagined the boards moving. A hand, a face, a presence just beneath the wood. The candle flickered, struggling to hold the light. The whispers multiplied. My voice, my tone, my inflections, but wrong, altered, deliberate. I wanted to step back. The dust rose, thickening, swirling around my legs, brushing my ankles. It smelled of decay and something metallic. The candle's flame quivered violently. Shadows bent, curling along the walls and ceiling. The whispers grew louder, closer. I stumbled again. The floorboards groaned, resisting my weight. The whispers followed, circling, patient, mocking. I held my breath. Every nerve tingled. The air vibrated with a hum I could feel in my chest. I tried to listen for a pattern, a rhythm, something familiar, but it eluded me. The candle trembled, soft light flickering across rough wood and cracked plaster. Shadows stretched toward me. The cold pressed tighter. I whispered, low, just a sound of my own voice. The floorboard answered in kind. It mimicked me perfectly, a soft, twisted echo of my words. I stepped back slowly, every motion careful, every breath deliberate. The whispers grew softer, thinner, circling in the corners. The room felt alive, pressing, patient. I could feel the floor beneath me waiting. The candles sputtered. The shadows recoiled slightly. A pause. The whispers faded into static, faint, teasing. I didn't move. I couldn't. The air smelled damp and metallic. The candle's glow barely touched the corners, and in that silence, I realized I was not alone. Not in this cabin. The whispers had not left. They were buried beneath the floorboards, patient, waiting. I held the candle close. My body stiff, my breath shallow, and the dust continued to swirl. The room grew colder still. The shadows stretched, patient, lingering. And though the whispers faded, I knew they were listening. The forest was quiet. A pale mist wrapped around the trunks, thick and lingering. Night pressed down, cold and heavy, on the ground beneath my boots. The light flickered. My shadow stretched along the path. And then it twisted. It separated from me. Just slightly at first, a curl of darkness moving differently than my body. I blinked, and it was closer. Branches leaned toward me, hands reaching. The air smelled of wet earth, of pine, of something older and sharper. I tried to steady my breath, but each exhale trembled. The flickering light made the shadows dance, alive. I blinked again. The shadow edged nearer, closer, patient, deliberate. And it wasn't just mine. Other shapes formed between the trees, curling, stretching. The path felt wrong, the soil soft beneath my shoes. Every step I took was echoed, mirrored by a presence I could not see. I wanted to run. I wanted to escape. But the shadows pressed closer, following, patient, teasing, branches scraped together. The mist shifted, brushing my cheeks with cold fingers. Every blink brought more movement. My own shadow no longer obeyed me. I stopped. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The shadows moved again. A stretch, a curl, a drift between the trees. They lingered just beyond the flickering light, watching, waiting. I could feel my pulse in my ears. My hands tingled, cold. The earth beneath me seemed to hum, alive. I blinked once more, and the shadow loomed, closer than I had ever imagined. Stretching, curling, patient, I tried to run. The mist clung to my legs. Branches tore at my jacket. Every step forward was matched, mirrored by shadows behind me. The forest seemed alive, rustling, breathing, moving with me, eyes unseen pressing from the darkness. Waiting, patient, always patient. I stumbled. The ground slick beneath my boots. The shadows swirled, flickering, curling, alive. The light trembled. My shadow moved without me. Other shapes twisted into being. I pressed my hands to my face. The cold burned through my gloves, my skin. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I blinked. And again the shadow edged closer. I stopped entirely. The forest hummed. Branches reached, still and quiet. The mist pressed against me, damp and heavy. Even in stillness, the shadows moved, patient, relentless, watching. I whispered into the cold air. My own voice sounded strange, small, swallowed by the dark. The shadows did not answer. They only waited. I could feel the panic beneath my skin. But the forest, the fog, the shadows, they held me in place, and I realized, even if I ran, even if I screamed, the shadows would follow. They moved when I blinked, always closer, and the forest waited patiently for me to notice. The forest was quiet. Mist curled between the trunks, soft and lingering. The ground smelled of damp pine and earth, thick and heavy. I walked slowly, boots pressing into wet leaves. Alone, or so I hoped. Then I saw it. A mirror, standing, impossible among the trees. Its surface pale, reflecting light that seemed not quite natural. I stepped closer. The air shifted. Cool, almost electric, brushing against my skin. I looked into the glass. And it wasn't just me. The reflection smiled. I had not. A shiver ran down my spine. The mist pressed closer. Branches brushed my cheeks. The forest seemed to hold its breath. I stepped back. The mirror remained, silent, watching, and the reflection, still smiling. The ground smelled damp, earthy, mixed with something metallic. My heart thudded against my ribs. Every step I took was hesitant, careful. I blinked. The reflection did not. It lingered, patient, deliberate, mocking me in the pale light. I circled the mirror slowly. The bark of the trees rough beneath my fingers. Mist curled around my ankles. The reflection followed, always perfectly aligned, always wrong. I could feel the forest bending. The air thickened, pressing against my chest. Branches leaned toward me, shadows stretching unnaturally. I tried to turn away. My reflection did not. It smiled still, and the air smelled colder, sharper, like iron and frost. I shivered. The mirror trembled slightly in the mist, as if breathing, and the forest around me seemed different. Older, patient, aware. I stepped back again. My own shadow stretched long across the ground. The reflection stretched with it, but not perfectly. It lingered behind, watching, waiting. The mist thickened. I could feel it pressing, cold and damp. Even the leaves seemed to whisper beneath my boots. I reached toward the mirror. Cold air met my fingers. The reflection did not move as I did. It stayed, smiling, patient, mocking. I stumbled. The forest pressed closer, shadows reaching, curling around the tree trunks. The mirror remained still, impossible. I drew a deep breath. The cold filled my lungs. The reflection leaned forward slightly, tilting its head in quiet curiosity. I could not look away. The forest seemed alive around me. Everything pressed closer, mist, shadow, silence. The mirror waited. I took another step back. The reflection stayed. Still smiling, still watching, the forest hummed quietly. Branches shifted softly. Leaves rustled under unseen feet. And though I could not move, I felt its gaze pressing into me. I stepped away slowly. The air smelled damp, earthy, metallic. The mirror remained among the trees, patient, silent, and the smile. The smile lingered even as I disappeared into the fog. The forest was still. Mist clung low to the ground, curling around the trunks of ancient trees. The air smelled damp, earthy, heavy with decay. I held a candle. Its flame trembled, flickering violently in the pale night. The light bent against the fog, stretching shadows along the path. Shapes emerged in the glow. Almost human. Almost wrong, I froze. The air pressed against my skin, sharp and cold. A subtle hum rose in the distance, low and resonant, vibrating against my chest. The forest seemed to breathe around me. Branches creaked, swaying slowly, reaching. Leaves rustled softly, brushing my cheeks with damp fingers. The candle shivered. The shapes moved closer, curling and stretching along the edges of the light. Each flicker revealed a form, each shadow a presence I could not name. The temperature dropped suddenly. Cold seeped into my bones, settling deep and heavy. My breath came in shallow clouds, trembling in the fog. I felt it then. The watching, eyes unseen, pressing into my back, my shoulders, my chest. Patient, silent. The candle's flame fought against the darkness. Shadows twisted, almost reaching, almost touching. I stepped back, boots sinking into the wet earth, leaves brushing my ankles. The hum grew louder, resonant, vibrating beneath my feet. The shapes swirled in the light, forming, dissolving, patient, watching. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. Every movement felt slow, weighted, as if the forest itself held me. The candle flickered again, a sharp, violent dance of light and shadow. Forms loomed closer, bending, stretching, twisting unnaturally. I could feel their gaze, every nerve alive with the sensation of being observed. Cold air pressed at my throat, damp against my skin. The flame shivered. A shadow elongated, then recoiled. Another form mirrored it, almost human. Almost wrong, I whispered. My own voice sounded small, swallowed by the dark. The hum answered, low, resonant, vibrating against the soles of my boots. The shapes pressed closer with each flicker. I could see faces now, twisted, patient, watching me when I dared not blink. The candle wavered again. The flame danced violently. I held it tight, hands trembling, feeling the warmth slip through my fingers. The cold thickened. The fog pressed closer, swirling around my legs, brushing my face with damp fingers. The forest hummed. Patient, alive, waiting, and then the light faltered. The candle trembled, and in that moment, I felt utterly alone. The shapes paused, as if waiting for the last flicker to die. My breath caught. The hum remained, low, resonant, vibrating through the earth, through me. The shadows lingered. The cold pressed, patient. I held the candle tight. The flame trembled once more, thin and fragile. And the forest waited, watching, patient. The light flickered one last time. And the shapes, almost human, almost wrong, stayed. The ground was soft, damp, and uneven. Mist clung low, brushing my ankles with cold fingers. The air smelled of wet soil and something faintly metallic. I noticed the hollow first by the sound. A soft hum, barely more than a vibration. It pressed against my chest, low, resonant, insistent. I knelt at the edge, fingers brushing the earth, cool and damp. The hollow seemed to pulse with the hum, alive beneath the surface. Something shifted. Not above ground, not in sight, but beneath my hands. A subtle movement, patient, deliberate. The mist swirled around my shoulders. It carried the faint scent of decay and wet leaves. Every breath trembled, shallow, hesitant. The hum grew louder, vibrating through my chest. A low, steady thrum that seemed to come from deep within the earth. It pressed against my ribs, my lungs, my skin. I leaned closer. Fingertips pressed against the edge of the hollow. Cold seeped into my bones, thin and sharp. A shadow shifted in the corner of my vision. The mist flickered, curling around my hands. I could feel the earth beneath me waiting. The hum pulsed again. Faster now, insistent. I could feel it in my throat, my ears, vibrating through every nerve. Something unseen moved beneath the surface. A twitch, a shift, patient, deliberate. The air smelled of damp earth and faint iron. I tried to listen, to understand, but the vibration drowned out everything else. I pressed my forehead closer to the edge. The hollow seemed alive, breathing beneath me, cold, patient, waiting. The hum deepened, resonating, curling around my chest. The mist thickened, damp against my skin. Shadows bent in the pale light, leaning closer. I drew back slightly. The hum persisted, steady, insistent. A presence lingered just beneath the earth, unseen but aware. The ground shifted subtly. A small rise, a quiver beneath my fingers. The vibration spread, faint, deliberate. I stepped back, boots pressing into the wet soil. The mist swirled around my legs. The hum remained, low, resonant, patient. The hollow seemed to breathe with me. Cold seeped into my hands and arms. I could feel the presence beneath, waiting. I knelt one last time. Heart hammering. The vibration pressed against my chest. I wanted to understand, but understanding felt impossible. The hum lingered as I rose. The mist hugged my shoulders. The shadows shifted, patient, watching, and the hollow remained. Silent now, almost, but I knew it was alive beneath the soil, waiting, patient. The forest was quiet. Mist rolled low across the underbrush, damp and clinging. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, heavy and sharp. I walked slowly, boots pressing into soft soil. Alone, or so I thought. Then I saw them. Pairs of glowing eyes, static, pale light reflecting back at me from the shadows. They didn't move, and yet I could feel them. Watching, patient. I whispered into the fog. The words felt small, swallowed by the damp air. No answer came, only the rustling of leaves around me. The eyes remained, unblinking, unwavering. Hidden among the trees, patient, deliberate, I could feel the weight of their gaze. Cold, pressing against my chest and shoulders. Every step forward made the forest feel thicker, heavier. Branches scraped my face. The mist wrapped around my ankles, chilling my skin. I tried to look away, but the eyes followed. The forest hummed softly. Not wind, not animal. Something else. Low, resonant, vibrating beneath the earth. I stopped. Every sound was loud, every shadow alive. The leaves rustled, brushing my ears and face. The eyes shifted slightly. Or maybe it was the fog moving. I couldn't tell. Either way, the feeling of being watched deepened. I whispered again. My voice shook, trembled in the mist. Nothing but the soft rustle of unseen branches answered. I could smell damp earth, faint moss, and something metallic. The air pressed closer, cold and heavy. The pairs of eyes lingered. Silent, patient, aware, I tried to step back. Soft footsteps pressed into wet leaves. The mist curled around me. The eyes did not blink, did not falter. Every nerve prickled. The forest seemed alive, breathing with quiet intent. Branches leaned, shadows bent, the fog clung. I whispered a third time. The rustling grew slightly louder, almost deliberate, but no answer. Only the weight of unseen attention. I pressed my hands against my chest. My breath came shallow, trembling. The pairs of eyes remained. Watching. Waiting. The mist thickened. Shadows curled between the trees, stretching, patient. The glowing eyes stayed, unwavering, as if rooted in the forest itself. I wanted to move, but every step felt heavy. The cold pressed against my skin, damp and insistent. The hum of the forest pulsed faintly, vibrating through my boots, my chest, my skull. I whispered one last time. The rustling of leaves answered, soft, teasing, patient. And the eyes did not leave. I turned slowly, leaving the glow behind. The fog swallowed the pairs of eyes, but I could still feel them, watching, patient. And I knew the forest held its secret. I had been seen, and it was waiting. The forest smelled different. Smoke lingered, thin and curling, though no fire burned. The mist wrapped low, damp against my legs, brushing my skin with cold fingers. I followed the trail. Each breath carried the sharp scent of smoke and wet earth. The pale light of evening made the fog seem heavier, slower, almost alive. I reached a circle of stones. They were old, darkened by moss and age, each one faintly humming with whispers. The air pressed closer, damp, heavy, pressing against my chest. The whispers seemed to float from the stones, soft, indecipherable, curling around my ears, teasing at the edges of comprehension. I knelt slightly, hands brushing the cold stone. A figure appeared, fleeting just at the edge of sight, almost human, almost wrong. I moved closer. The figure dissolved into the mist, leaving only the scent of smoke behind. The whispers continued, patient, insistent, circling the stones. The ground was soft beneath my boots, leaves pressed damp against my soles. The mist swirled around the circle, brushing my hands and face. I tried to breathe slowly. The smoke curled into my nostrils, sharp, metallic, damp. The whispers hummed through my chest, vibrating faintly. The figure reappeared. Or perhaps another. It vanished again when I approached, always just beyond reach. A shadow, a flicker, a presence. The stones pulsed softly. I could feel the hum under my palms, through my fingers. Cold pressed into my bones, mingling with the smell of smoke. The forest held its breath. The mist thickened. The whispers grew faintly louder, almost patient, almost deliberate. I stepped back slowly. Every footfall pressed into soft leaves, wet with evening dew. The smoke curled, twisting between the trees, reaching toward me. I felt a presence shift behind me, something unseen, moving just beyond the circle, patient, watching, waiting. I knelt once more, hands brushing the stones. The whispers rose and fell, soft, circular, vibrating through my chest. The smoke wrapped around my wrists, my fingers almost tangible. The figure shimmered again, fleeting, eyes like pale light, vanishing the moment I tried to focus. The mist pressed closer, damp and heavy. The whispers circled the stones, patient, alive, insistent. The smoke carried the faint taste of ash, cold and metallic. I rose slowly, stepping away. The forest hummed faintly, holding itself still. The circle of stones remained patient. The whispers lingered, curling around my ears, and the figure, it had vanished. But the smell of smoke stayed. The silence pressed, heavy and aware, and I knew the forest was still watching. The fog pressed low to the ground. It clung to my boots, curling damp around my ankles. The forest smelled of wet leaves, cold earth, and something faintly metallic. I walked slowly, each breath trembling shallow, alone. Or at least I thought I was. Then I felt it. Soft, gentle hands brushing my shoulder. Light, fleeting, impossible. I turned. Nothing. Only mist curling between the trees. Branches swayed slowly, shadows stretching longer than they should. The fog thickened. Every sound muffled. Leaves rustled softly, almost whispering. I could feel the pressure of the shadows. They lengthened, reaching, curling toward me with patient intent. The air grew colder, pressing against my skin. I stepped back slowly, boots sinking into damp soil. The soft touch lingered in my mind, though my shoulder felt empty. The mist swirled around my hands, cold and damp, pressing, insistent. Branches scraped my face, shadows bending unnaturally in the pale light. I whispered, hesitant, into the fog. No answer, only silence, and the soft pressure of unseen fingers against my shoulder. The forest seemed alive, patient, watching. Every step forward made the shadows stretch further, lean closer. Every inhale brought the scent of wet earth, metal, and cold air. I tried to move faster, but the fog thickened, dense, pressing against my chest, slowing my breath. The shadows swirled with the mist, bending in impossible ways. The soft touch came again, not forceful, but deliberate. A gentle, impossible reminder that I was not alone. I stopped entirely. The forest hummed faintly beneath my feet, vibration through soil and roots. The mist wrapped around my legs, cool and damp. Shadows leaned further, stretching, patient, curling toward me. I could feel their intent, quiet and insistent. The pale light of the fog made them stretch impossibly long. I tried to look behind me again. Nothing moved. Only the fog, swirling, thick and deliberate. The soft pressure on my shoulder lingered, impossible, patient. I drew a trembling breath. The air smelled metallic, damp, heavy. Every nerve prickled with awareness, with fear, with regret. The shadows continued to reach. The mist curled around my boots and fingers. The forest waited, patient, holding itself still, I whispered again. The fog swallowed my words. Leaves rustled faintly, teasing, circling. And the soft touch lingered in memory, in sensation. I stepped back slowly. The shadows pressed closer, patient, deliberate. The fog hugged my shoulders, damp and cold, and I realized I could never truly leave the weight of this place behind. Soft hands. Patient shadows. The forest, alive and waiting, whispered around me. The forest thinned. Mist curled low, clinging to moss and fallen leaves. The air smelled damp, earthy, and faintly metallic. I stumbled upon it. A cabin no map could mark. Windows dark, doors slightly ajar. The wood was old, rough beneath my fingers. Branches scraped against the roof, scratching softly. The fog pressed closer, curling around my boots. Footsteps echoed inside. Soft, measured, deliberate. But no one was there. I pressed my face to the doorway. The room seemed to breathe. Shadows stretched and curled in the pale light. The air was thick, almost viscous. Smelled of old smoke and damp wood. The faint hum of silence vibrated in my chest. I stepped closer. Floorboards creaked softly beneath my weight. The door swayed slightly in the fog. A shadow moved against the far wall. Or perhaps it was the light shifting. Either way, it felt alive, patient, aware. I leaned forward. The air was colder here, damp and pressing against my skin. A faint metallic tang lingered, sharp in my nostrils. The room exhaled slowly, as if breathing with me. Every movement of the mist seemed deliberate. The shadows stretched unnaturally, reaching just beyond the corners of vision. I could hear soft whispers beneath the echo of my own footsteps. Indecipherable, curling, patient. They pressed against my chest, vibrating faintly. I stepped back. The fog pressed against my legs, damp and insistent. The cabin remained patient, breathing, watching. I reached for the doorframe. Rough wood, cold beneath my palm. The air felt thick, heavy, like something unseen was pressing in. A floorboard groaned under the echo of soft footsteps. I froze. The mist swirled, curling against my boots. The room seemed to inhale and exhale with deliberate slowness. Shadows twisted, reaching, patient, almost aware. The hum of silence pressed against my ears, insistent. I leaned back slowly, heart thudding in my chest. The cabin waited. The fog curled through the doorway, winding around the steps. I could feel the weight of the empty space. The silence stretched, patient, alive. And I knew I had been seen. The forest held its breath. The mist pressed closer. The cabin exhaled slowly, shadows shifting just beyond the edges of sight. I turned away, boots pressing into soft earth. The fog swallowed my path. The air smelled damp, metallic, and cold. The forgotten cabin remained. Patient. Alive in the mist. Watching. The forest was quiet, but alive. Mist curled around the trunks of the trees, damp and cool against my skin. The air smelled of wet leaves, cold soil, and faint smoke. I held a candle. Its flame flickered, pale and weak. Shadows danced across the undergrowth, bending unnaturally. Faces appeared, faint at first, etched into the bark of trees. When I blinked, they vanished, melting back into shadow. The candlelight caught them again. Eyes empty, patient. Mouths whispering names I did not know. The whispers circled me, soft, insistent. Each one seemed to rise from a different part of the forest. The fog carried the faint metallic scent of damp earth. I stepped slowly. Boots pressed into wet leaves, soft and muffled. The shadows stretched, twisting along the ground toward me. The faces flickered. Each blink revealed new forms, pale, almost human, almost wrong. The whispers continued, patient, circling, insistent. I held the candle higher. The smell of smoke mixed with damp moss, curling into my nose. The forest hummed faintly, vibration pressing against my chest. The faces watched. They leaned from the trees, stretching with the flicker of flame. Eyes empty, mouths moving soundlessly, I whispered softly. No answer, only the rustle of leaves brushing against my arms. The fog pressed closer, damp and cold. The candle trembled in my hand. Each flicker revealed more watchers, more shadows, patient, deliberate. The forest felt alive, every branch, every leaf a silent observer. I blinked again. The faces vanished, leaving only the twisting shadows of branches. The whispers lingered faintly, curling around my ears, around my chest. I could feel them circling. Patient, almost aware of my heartbeat. The pale light of the candle stretched the shadows further, bending the forest itself. The fog thickened. Cold pressed against my skin, damp and insistent. The whispers hummed softly beneath the rustling of leaves. I held the candle close. The faces flickered one last time, almost smiling, almost alive. The forest held its breath around me. I stepped back. Boots pressed into soft earth, mist curling around my ankles. The shadows bent and twisted, patient, watching. The candle flickered again. And then the faces were gone. But I could still feel them, circling, patient, waiting. The forest thickened. Fog pressed low, curling around roots and fallen leaves. The air smelled damp, cold, and faintly metallic. I stumbled upon a door. Wood old, rough, almost breathing beneath my fingers. It pulsed faintly, warm against my hand before I even touched it. The mist swirled around me. Branches scraped against each other softly, whispering. The forest seemed aware, patient, waiting. A creak broke the silence. The door swung open on its own. I froze. A voice called me from inside. Soft, deliberate, knowing. Not quite human. Not quite echo. The air grew colder, pressing damp against my skin. The smell of old wood and smoke drifted outward. My heartbeat thudded in my chest, loud in the hush of the forest. I stepped closer, hesitant. Every footfall pressed into damp earth. The fog curled around my boots, thick and insistent. The voice repeated my name, almost gentle, almost patient, and the forest seemed to lean closer. The door pulsed again beneath my hand, warm, alive, insistent. I could feel it through my fingertips. Shadows stretched from the fog, reaching patient, curling toward me with deliberate intent. The mist swirled, carrying the faint metallic tang of damp earth. I whispered, unsure, into the doorway. The voice did not reply, only waited. The fog pressed closer. The forest held its breath. The door's edges seemed to breathe. Warmth pulsed against my palm. I could feel something watching, patient, deliberate, aware. I tried to step back. Boots sank slightly into soft, damp earth. The mist wrapped around my ankles, pressing. The voice called my name again. Faint, deliberate, patient. I could feel it curling through the fog, threading between the trees. The door swayed slightly, warm and alive. Branches scraped softly against the frame. The shadows stretched longer, patient, deliberate. I drew a shallow breath. The smell of smoke and old wood mixed with cold forest air. The voice was still, waiting. The forest itself seemed to pulse around me. I stepped back slowly, careful. The fog curled around my legs, damp and cold. The door remained, warm and patient, knowing. I could feel the weight of it. Watching, waiting. The forest had seen me. And the door, it knew my name. Mist rolled in waves, cold, damp, clinging to my boots and the backs of my knees. The forest smelled of wet pine, earth, and faint smoke. Shadows twisted along the path, bending, stretching, impossible in the pale light. The mist made them fluid, alive, patient. I held my candle higher. The flame trembled violently, sputtering. Every flicker revealed shapes, fleeting, impossible. Something approached. Tall, silent, deliberate. No reflection in the pale, wavering light. My breath caught. The air pressed damp and cold against my chest. The smell of wet leaves and iron filled my nostrils. The shadow moved closer. I could feel it in the mist, pressing, patient. Every heartbeat thudded in my ears. The candle threatened to die, flickering violently, sputtering against the cold draft. I cupped my hands, trying to shield it. The mist swirled around my legs. Soft, wet, insistent. Branches scraped softly, twisting in impossible ways. I stepped back slowly. The shadow seemed to mirror me, bending with the mist. Every inhale brought the metallic tang of damp earth. I whispered, unsure. No answer, only the pulse of silence around me. The shadow loomed, patient, deliberate. The candle flared suddenly, revealing more shapes. Shadows bending between trees, stretching toward me. The mist twisted, alive, moving with intent. I froze. The tall figure drew closer, soundless. My boots pressed into soft, damp earth. The forest seemed aware. Branches swayed without wind. The mist hummed faintly against my ears, vibrating through my chest. The candle shuddered again. I could feel the heat against my hands, weak and flickering. The shadow did not move like an animal. It moved like awareness itself. I tried to step aside. Mist pressed against my legs, cold and heavy. Shadows stretched, twisting, patient, deliberate. I whispered again. The forest swallowed my words. The mist carried the faint scent of wet soil and smoke. The figure halted briefly. Tall, silent, impossible. No reflection, no sound, only presence. The candle threatened to die once more. Its light flickered violently, revealing the twisting shadows of the mist. The forest held its breath. I took a shallow breath. The air smelled metallic, damp, and cold. The shadow waited, patient, watching. The forest floor dipped suddenly. Mist rolled low, curling into a shallow hollow. The air smelled damp, earthy, and faintly metallic. I knelt at the edge. A soft hum rose from the depression, vibrating through my chest. The fog pressed close, damp against my skin, insistent. The hollow whispered, soft, deliberate, curling around my ears. Every word chilled me, curling into my bones. I wanted to leave. My legs ached, my breath caught. But curiosity rooted me to the damp earth. The hum grew, subtle and patient. It carried a weight, as if the forest itself leaned closer. I could feel the vibration in my fingertips, the faint metallic tang in the air. The shadows shifted. Branches swayed without wind. The mist twisted, almost alive, curling between my legs. I leaned closer. The whispers threaded through the fog. They were soft, impossible to understand, yet heavy with meaning. The hollow seemed aware. Every inhale pressed damp and cold against my chest. Every exhale carried the scent of wet soil and faint smoke. I touched the edge of the depression. The earth was cold, almost pulsing beneath my fingers. The hum responded, curling and bending like liquid sound. A shiver ran down my spine. The whispers grew patient, deliberate, insistent. The forest seemed to wait, holding its breath around me. I wanted to pull back. The mist clung to my boots, cold, wet, and pressing. But my gaze remained fixed on the hollow. Soft shapes moved in the fog. Branches curled like fingers, reaching without moving. The hollow hummed, vibrating through my chest, through my thoughts. I whispered, almost to myself. No answer, only the hum curling through the damp air. The fog thickened, insistent, alive. The whispers pressed closer. Every word impossible to understand cut into my mind. I felt the weight of attention, patient, deliberate. I stepped back slowly. Boots sank into soft earth. The fog swirled around me, carrying the faint scent of wet leaves and smoke. The hollow remained. Patient. Hum. Whisper. Vibration. It waited. I drew a shallow breath. The air was damp and metallic. The whispers lingered, curling in the mist. Curiosity and dread pressed together in my chest. I turned away slowly. The forest exhaled around me, soft, insistent. The hollow hummed, whispering, patient, aware. And I knew it would not forget I had been there. The forest pressed close. Mist hung low, damp and cold, clinging to boots and sleeves. The air smelled of wet leaves and old wood. I stumbled upon a clearing. Candles, stones, symbols etched into the dirt. The earth smelled faintly metallic like old blood. My candle trembled in my hand. Its flame flickered violently, reacting to something unseen. Shadows bent and stretched between the trees, watching. The symbols glowed faintly in the pale light. I could feel their presence in the damp air. The mist swirled around my ankles, cold and insistent. A soft rustling moved through the clearing. Branches scraped, bending without wind. The forest seemed aware, patient, deliberate. I knelt, tracing the symbols with my fingertips. The earth felt cold, almost pulsing beneath my touch. The candle flame flared, casting shapes that twisted like fingers. The shadows seemed to pulse with it, soft, deliberate, reaching toward the circle. The hum of the forest vibrated through my chest. I inhaled, damp air pressing against my lungs. The faint smell of smoke and wet soil filled my nostrils. Every step I had taken had led here, and the clearing seemed alive with attention. The flame of my candle danced violently. Shapes emerged in the flickering light, twisting, impossible. I could feel eyes upon me. I tried to stand, but the ground beneath the symbols seemed to pulse. Soft vibration, almost a whisper underfoot. The mist pressed closer, carrying the smell of damp earth and candle wax. I stepped back. The symbols glowed faintly, reacting to my presence. Branches creaked and twisted in the fog. The flame in my hand flared again. Shadows bent unnaturally. The forest hummed softly, insistent, patient. I traced my fingertips through the dirt once more. The earth felt alive, responsive, deliberate. The candle flickered, threatening to die, yet somehow drawing warmth from the air itself. I whispered softly, almost to myself. The clearing seemed to lean in, listening. Mist and shadows intertwined, patient, aware. The shapes in the candlelight twisted closer. I could feel the hum through my chest. The forest held its breath, watching, waiting. I drew back slowly. Boots pressed into damp earth, the smell of wet leaves thick in the fog. The circle pulsed faintly, soft and deliberate. I could feel it watching me. The candle threatened to die again, sputtering against the damp air. Shadows stretched between the trees, patient, deliberate. I stepped away from the symbols. The clearing seemed to exhale softly, mist curling with intent. The flame in my hand trembled violently, and then quiet. Soft, lingering, aware. The forest waited. And I knew it had seen me. The forest was quiet. Mist clung to the underbrush, cold against my skin. The smell of wet leaves pressed into my nose, damp and earthy. A soft stir reached my ears. Leaves shifting. No wind moved them. I froze. The rustling formed shapes in the fog, bending like fingers. A pale light reflected off wet bark, and then my name. Soft, drawn out, whispered, impossible yet unmistakable. I turned slowly. The fog pressed against my cheeks, damp and cold. Branches swayed without wind. Leaves moved again. The shapes shifted, forming patterns that seemed deliberate. Each rustle carried my name, soft and insistent. A shiver ran down my spine. The forest was watching, aware. Every breath I took carried the smell of damp soil and faint smoke. I stepped forward cautiously. The rustling followed, curling around my boots. Shapes in the fog twisted with intent, bending toward me. I whispered back, almost to myself. No answer, only the soft repetition of my name. The mist thickened, clinging to my legs, damp and insistent. The forest had learned to speak. Leaves shifted without wind. Shadows twisted between the trees, patient, deliberate. I tried to step back. The rustling swirled around my ankles, soft and deliberate. My name echoed in every fold of fog. The pale light of my candle flickered. Shadows stretched toward the sound, bending impossibly. The forest seemed alive, patient, aware. I could feel its attention pressing against my chest. Each breath trembled in the damp air. The rustling whispered insistently, repeating, knowing, waiting. I knelt briefly, letting the mist curl around my hands. Leaves shifted under my fingers, soft and deliberate. Every whisper pressed into my mind, soft, invasive. I rose slowly. The fog seemed to pull closer, bending the air around me. The rustling carried my name again, deliberate, patient. I stepped away from the shapes. Boots pressed into soft earth, wet leaves clinging. The forest held its breath, silent, aware, and yet in the soft whispers of the leaves, I knew it would remember me. Every rustle, every breath, every soft calling, the mist swirled, patient and deliberate. The forest whispered, and I walked slowly alone. The fog pressed thick between the trunks. Damp earth clung to my boots. The scent of wet leaves and moss filled the air. A low voice drifted from a massive oak. Soft, almost a hum, but deliberate, insistent. I stepped closer. Branches twisted overhead, scratching against one another. The bark smelled faintly of smoke and decay. The voice moved as I moved. Every step forward it shifted, always just out of reach. I could feel its attention pressing into my mind. Shadows curled around the tree. Fog swirled at my ankles. The forest seemed to lean in, listening. I whispered back, cautiously, but no answer came. Only the low, deliberate hum echoing through the mist. The ground beneath the oak trembled slightly. Leaves stirred, though the air remained still. Something unseen shifted just beyond the veil of fog. I reached out to touch the bark. It pulsed faintly under my fingers. A warmth, unnatural and insistent, seeped into my skin. The voice grew clearer, soft syllables curling around my thoughts, trailing down my spine. I tried to step back. The mist thickened, pressing damp against my face. Shadows stretched toward me, patient, deliberate. The forest seemed alive with eyes I could not see. Their attention weighed on my chest. Every breath trembled in the cool, damp air. I followed the oak slowly, but the voice shifted with me. Always ahead, always whispering, always watching. Branches scraped overhead, wet leaves rustling beneath my boots. The hum vibrated through the mist, through the soil, into my chest and bones. I froze, sensing eyes within my mind. Cold, deliberate, watching. The voice hummed insistently, almost playful, but with a weight that pressed into me. I stepped to the side. Shadows bent around me. Fog wrapped tight, moist and still. The oak loomed larger, its presence undeniable. The voice called softly, each syllable echoing in my head. I wanted to turn, to run. But the mist clung to my legs, the forest held its breath, and the voice followed, and then silence. Not empty, but waiting. The fog shifted. The forest held me in quiet dread. I could still feel its eyes, still hear its soft, deliberate hum, and I walked slowly, alone. Fog rolled over the forest floor, thick and damp. My boots sank slightly into the wet earth. The air smelled of cold pine and decaying leaves. Shadows stretched long in the flickering candlelight. At first they mimicked me, every step and pause. Then, slowly, they diverged. I froze. They moved independently, bending around trees, slipping through the mist. And then they whispered, soft voices, faint but insistent. Secrets I had never spoken aloud. Words I had buried, thoughts I thought forgotten. The candle trembled in my hand. Its flame struggled against a wind that seemed alive. It pressed cold against my face, carrying the scent of wet earth and smoke. The whispers grew, circling me like the mist itself. Branches scraped overhead. Leaves rustled without a breeze. I tried to look away, but the shadows followed, bending toward me, listening. Every movement I made, they mirrored, then diverged again. I could feel them reach into my chest, into my thoughts, pulling fragments of memory into the open, exposing them quietly, gently, but impossibly real. The forest seemed to lean closer. Fog wrapped tight around my legs, sticky and cold. Shadows pressed along the edges of my vision, never still, always watching, I whispered to myself. No answer came. Only the hushed echo of my own secrets whispered back, twisted, distorted, but familiar. The candle flickered violently. Warm light fought against the encroaching dark. The wind tugged at my clothes, carried the soft hum of the forest into my ears. I stepped backward. The earth felt uneven beneath my feet. Shadows clung, stretching thin fingers along the mist. Each whispered word pressed on me. Old regrets, unspoken fears, confessions I hadn't voiced. The forest knew them all, and it carried them in silence. I held the candle tighter. Its flame shivered against the alive wind. Shadows twisted and parted, revealing glimpses of shapes that were almost human, almost wrong. I wanted to run, but the mist tangled my legs, and the shadows whispered still, softly, impossibly close, learning, repeating, reminding me of everything I had tried to hide. I felt the air thicken. The hum of the forest pressed into my ears. Every breath I drew tasted of damp soil and fear. I could feel the eyes of the dark everywhere. I stopped. The whispers softened, but persisted. Echoes of myself, echoes of secrets I thought were mine alone. And then, a pause. The forest held its breath. The candle flickered once more, and I was left with the quiet, with shadows stretching long into the mist, and with the chilling certainty that some things cannot remain hidden. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Fog rolled in thick waves, clinging to my skin and dampening every breath. Each step sank slightly into the soft earth. My boots left shallow impressions, swallowed immediately by the mist. I tried to call out, but my voice vanished. It didn't echo. It didn't linger. It was gone, as if the fog had swallowed it whole. Shapes moved in the periphery. I blinked, and they shifted, never quite solid, never quite gone. A branch scraped low against my shoulder, wet with condensation. I shivered, feeling the damp cold crawl along my spine. Silence pressed against my ears, heavy, almost tactile. It muted the rustle of leaves, the hum of insects, even the distant wind. Everything was absorbed, leaving me alone with the fog and my own heart. I stumbled. The ground rose and fell unexpectedly beneath my feet. Roots snagged my shoes. I barely caught myself. The smell of wet earth and decaying leaves filled my nostrils, thick and choking. I tried to focus, to pick a path, but the fog twisted everything. Every shadow could be reaching, every shape could be watching. The trees leaned closer, their wet bark slick in the pale light. I whispered my own name. Nothing returned. Only silence thicker than the fog itself. It filled my lungs, pressed against my chest, and made each heartbeat thunder in my ears. Soft footsteps echoed somewhere behind me, or was it ahead? I couldn't tell. The fog swallowed sound, yet hinted at movement. A low rustle, like cloth brushing against stone, just beyond reach. I stopped, every nerve taut. The mist clung to my face and hands, chilling, damp, alive. Each breath I drew tasted faintly metallic. The forest waited. I waited. Shapes loomed just beyond sight. Every blink made them twist and merge with the fog. I wanted to step forward, but my legs felt heavy, rooted. The fog thickened, coiling around me like soft fingers, insulating me from sound, from reassurance, from safety. I caught a glimpse of a shadow, a pale, thin figure. Then it vanished. The silence returned, oppressive and absolute. No rustle, no whisper, no hint that anything else existed. And yet I could feel eyes, countless eyes, moving just beyond perception. I breathed slowly, forcing my heart to settle. The damp fog kissed my skin, slick against my neck and cheeks. Every step I took was muffled, each movement softened, swallowed. I could not hear myself, could not hear the forest, could not hear relief. I stumbled again, catching my foot on something unseen. My hands brushed rough bark, slick with moisture. I pressed against it, steadying myself, tasting the cold iron of worry on my tongue. The fog pressed closer, heavy and watchful. A faint shimmer of pale light moved ahead. I thought it might be a break in the mist, but when I reached for it, the fog thickened instead. It swallowed the light, swallowed my steps, swallowed the sound of my breathing. I froze. The world was gone. All that remained was fog, thick and sentient, and the oppressive knowledge that I was utterly alone. And still, the silence whispered, and the fog listened. The fog thinned just enough to see shapes, pale, flickering. They lingered at the edge of vision, just beyond clarity. I blinked. They shifted, or maybe I did. Impossible to tell. Each figure seemed to pulse with its own faint light, pale as moon-washed ash. The forest held its breath. Every rustle of leaves, every drip of water from the wet canopy felt amplified against the stillness. I shivered as the cool air brushed my neck damp with mist. They didn't move, yet I felt their eyes, counting me. Me alone, here in the half-light between shadow and fog. I stepped forward. The soft earth pressed against my boots. Every step echoed a little too softly, swallowed immediately by the fog. The figures remained at the periphery, flickering like distant stars that could see everything. The air smelled of wet pine and cold soil. I drew in a slow breath. It tasted of damp leaves and something faintly metallic, like iron. My chest tightened. A low hum rose from somewhere beneath the trees, soft, vibrating through the soles of my feet, through the marrow in my bones. I swallowed hard. The figures flickered again, closer this time. Or was it only in my mind? I tried to look away. I tried to move, but their gaze followed, slipping around me like liquid shadow. I realized then I couldn't escape them. Not their eyes. Not the feeling of being quietly observed. Branches scraped the mist, wet bark whispering against one another. The faint hum rose and fell, keeping pace with my heart. Each inhalation caught on the tightness in my throat. I crouched briefly, pressing palms against cold, damp soil. The figures stayed, motionless yet alive, as if aware of every heartbeat, every tremor of fear. The fog curled around my fingers, cool and heavy. I heard my own breath, a fragile, shivering sound that felt almost too loud in the silence. And still they watched. Pale shapes, barely there, but insistent, patient, eternal. A faint breeze touched my face, carrying the scent of wet leaves and the distant tang of something old, something forgotten. The figures flickered again, closer. I could sense their edges now, more solid yet still unreal. I wanted to run. My legs felt leaden. My hands chilled. The soft earth pressing beneath me a reminder that I could not escape this weight. The mist thickened, curling around my ankles. Then my knees damp and cold. I stood frozen. A figure shifted at the very edge, just enough to catch my eye. It wasn't moving, yet my mind insisted it had. The hum faded slowly, leaving only silence. The fog whispered against my ears. And the figures stayed, watching, flickering, waiting. I swallowed, the cold air burning slightly in my lungs. Step by step, I inched forward. Each movement was slow, careful, deliberate. Their gaze never left me, and the forest itself seemed to lean in closer, holding its secrets. The pale light of their forms flickered one last time, and then, swallowed by fog, they disappeared at the edge. But the feeling lingered, the weight of eyes that follow, the knowing silence that waits. I moved on, alone. The mist curling around me, soft and watchful, and the forest breathing quietly in its endless dark. The candle trembles. A thin, wavering flame stretches against the dark. Cold air drifts through the trees, brushing my face, wet with mist. Shadows twist across the undergrowth. Forms I cannot name, shapes that bend, stretch, and fold in ways the mind resists. I watch, but my eyes cannot hold them. The forest exhales, a slow, almost deliberate breath that presses against my chest. The damp earth smells of moss and decay. Every inhalation tastes faintly metallic, heavy with the hush of things unseen. I step closer to the candle. Its light flickers, revealing more shadows than the darkness can hold. The flame quivers at the edge of breath, and I realize I am not moving. I am held. Branches scrape lightly against one another. The mist curls around my ankles, cold and insistent. I feel its touch on my skin, delicate yet unyielding. The candle dances in my trembling hand. Forms move with the light. A face, perhaps two. Impossible to focus. Each blink brings a new flicker, a new shape, more incomprehensible than the last. The air hums softly, a vibration through the fog, through the earth, through my bones. I hear nothing else, yet every sound is magnified. My own heartbeat feels too loud, echoing in the tight space between shadow and mist. The flame dips lower. I exhale slowly, almost in rhythm with its faltering. Shadows stretch toward me. Not in malice, just awareness. They know me. I reach out. The light bends around my fingers. Cold rises from the damp soil, brushing the backs of my hands. The forest waits, holding its breath, a rustle behind me. Soft, deliberate, like fabric brushing stone. I turn, nothing there. But I feel it. Eyes, or perhaps the idea of them, inside the fog. The candle struggles against the night. The wick hisses faintly, soft as a whisper. The flame leans one way, then another, throwing shadows that twist like smoke in the corner of my vision. The mist thickens. It presses closer, moist and silent. The air is alive with the weight of stillness. And still the flame holds, a small defiance against everything around me. I sense the shapes more than see them. A swirl here, a ripple there. Forms that mimic breathing, though the forest holds no lungs. The light fractures them, bending and folding into impossible angles. I kneel slightly, the cold seeping into my knees. The forest breathes through me now, and I am part of it and yet apart. The candle dips lower. Its glow is fragile. Every flicker reveals what should not be seen. Every shadow leans closer, patient, patient, patient. I am still. I let the cold wind touch my face, taste the wetness of the night on my lips. I let the forest move around me, letting its silent hum seep into my bones. The flame fights, weak but persistent. I understand now. The light will go last. I am the last witness. I breathe slowly, letting the damp air fill my lungs. I feel the presence of everything I cannot name, of every shadow that leans and waits in the flickering light. I do not run. The candle leans again, and I lean with it. The darkness does not consume. It simply is, and I am here. The forest exhales once more. I am alone, and yet not. The candle burns its final whispers. I close my eyes, and the shadows wait patiently, while the flame dies last. The pines sway. A wind that does not move stirs their needles. Soft whispers ripple through the forest, continuous, a chant without end. I step carefully, fog curling around my ankles. Every footfall muffled, absorbed by the damp earth. The scent of pine and cold moisture fills my nose, heavy and sharp. The whispers follow me. Not voices exactly. A rhythm. A low, hypnotic pull. I blink. The fog twists with the light, thick and uneven. Each breath tastes faintly of damp leaves and distant smoke. I try to notice the path, but the trees bend, shift, subtle yet deliberate. Shadows stretch between trunks, soft and insistent. I feel them lean toward me, patient, patient, a rustle overhead. I tilt my head. Branches sway with no wind. A pine cone drops somewhere behind me. I startle at the sound, though I know I am alone. The chant grows. Soft syllables fold into the hum of the forest. The fog thickens, moving with a strange intelligence, curving around me like liquid. I move, hesitant, mesmerized. The whispering seems to echo my steps, matching my breathing, following my heartbeat. Shapes appear and vanish in the fog. Pale trunks loom close, too close, as if the forest itself is leaning in. I brush against needles sharp and cold, their scent biting deeper into my lungs. The forest hums through me, not with sound, but with vibration, through the soles of my feet, through the hollow of my chest. I can feel it tracing the rhythm of the whispers. I try to speak. My voice dies before it leaves my lips. The fog swallows it, smooth and complete. The chant continues. I am no longer just here. I am moving with it. Soft shapes flicker at the edges of my vision. Figures made of shadow and fog. They sway with the rhythm. They do not speak, but I know they watch, silent and knowing. A branch brushes my shoulder, cold, slightly wet. I startle, but the sensation is gone almost as quickly. The fog closes in. The whispers curl around me, wrapping my thoughts in soft insistence. I take another step. Another. The forest bends with me. Each breath aligns with the chant. The ground hums faintly beneath my knees. I notice a subtle warmth in the fog. Not comforting. Watching, waiting. The whispers swell, persistent, patient. The pines sway with my movements, as if I am no longer walking through them, but they through me. My hands brush wet needles. The dampness soaks into my skin, tingling along my veins. Every inhale tastes of pine, earth, and something older. Something alive. The whispering intensifies. The fog flows in waves, curling at my feet, touching my legs, rising higher around my shoulders. I realize I cannot separate myself from it. The forest has claimed me. I do not resist. I let it move through me, letting the rhythm guide my steps. The shadows follow, bend, and sway in harmony. Silence presses briefly. Then the whispers resume, soft as breath, pulling me deeper into the pine-thick fog. I feel weightless and heavy all at once. The mist becomes almost tactile. It clings to my hair, my skin, my clothes. The whispers circle me, intimate, insistent, filling the space between tree and branch, between shadow and breath. I close my eyes. The chant threads through my mind. I am no longer separate. The forest moves with me and I with it, step by step. I vanish into the rhythm, into the fog, into the soft, endless whispering of the pines. and the forest listens and waits, and breathes around me. The edge of the forest comes slowly. Branches thin, mist curls lower, reluctant to leave. Every step feels heavier, as if the earth itself knows I am near the end. A faint whisper drifts through the pines, soft, intimate pulling. Not urgent, but insistent. I pause. The air tastes of damp needles and something older, something waiting. The light shifts, pale and uneven, filtering through thinning branches. Shadows stretch long and deliberate. I can feel them following me, soft, patient, like breath against my neck. A rustle of leaves. No wind moves them. Shapes flicker at the corner of my vision. The forest exhales slowly. It waits. I take another step, and then another. The whispers fold into my mind, gentle, coaxing. The sound hums in my chest, vibrating along my spine. I notice the ground change beneath my feet, from soft moss to dry needles. The scent shifts too, earthy, sharp, final. Every inhalation reminds me how long I've walked, how far I've come. The last whisper brushes my ear, a syllable I cannot name. I hesitate. The edge of the forest is here, yet not really here. It is a threshold, a door without hinges, opening to something I can feel but cannot see. I place my hand against a tree, rough bark, cool and solid. I breathe in slowly. The mist wraps around me like fingers, soft, insistent, alive. I take the next step, and the forest shifts with me. Shadows lean and stretch. The whispers curl into silence, expectant, patient. The air tastes faintly of smoke and pine. I feel a weight settle on my shoulders. Not heavy, but undeniable. The forest has observed, followed, guided me, and now it lets me go. Or perhaps I let it. The light outside the trees is pale, flickering, uneven. I can see beyond the last trunks. I can see what awaits, but the forest does not release me fully. Soft footsteps echo behind me. Or perhaps they echo from within me. I do not turn. I cannot. The edge is thin. A boundary between what I was and what I am becoming. Another whisper. Closer now. Not frightening. Not welcoming, just knowing. I take the final step. Cold air washes over me, sharp, cleansing. The mist parts reluctantly, swirling around my ankles, then dissipates. I pause. Every sense tingling, every shadow receding. I am outside the forest, yet inside it, all at once. The forest exhales again, and I hear it clearly this time. Not a sound, not a voice, but a presence, patient and eternal. The last step is behind me. The path remains, but I do not follow. The whispers fade into memory, and I stand in silence, alone but not afraid. The forest waits, and I walk forward.